I'm Tom O'Connor. You're very welcome to the west coast of Ireland. Today we're going to go through a few whiskies, myself and Brian. I'm the Vice President of Entertainment for Butler Technologies.
And I'm the Vice President for Storytelling in Butler Technologies. And I'm Brian Nolan. I'm a historian in Galway City. We have great fun here with the American tourists every year. We tell them about leprechauns, of course, but we tell them also about Irish whiskey. And that's why we're here today.
Communications is vital for any success in any business. Like Butler Technologies, Jameson have a strong history of communication.
A guy called Marconi came to Ireland in 1905. He was competing hugely with the inventors, Alexander Graham Bell and so on, for this new thing called the telephone and communication. He built the Marconi wireless station in Clifton in Connemara, 50 miles to the west of us here. And he communicated with Newfoundland in Canada and therefore back into Boston and down into New York. So all of a sudden by 1911 or thereabouts, we were able to do real-time communication using the Marconi wireless technology that he had developed, without which, by the way, we wouldn't have the internet today.
So Jameson Whisky is the largest Irish whisky brand exported from Ireland, with 50 million bottles of whisky exported in 2019.
50 million, that's a lot of whisky.
Yeah, there are now only 6 really fully operational distilleries in Ireland. Back in the 19th century there were 100, so we have lost a lot of distilleries, but we've made up good ground in the last 20 years with our whisky exports. And there's another Jameson connection. Marconi's grandfather was John Jameson,
who founded Jameson Whisky back in the 18th century. So communication has always been a big deal with whisky. You wouldn't think so, but you had to know when the distiller up the mountain, because most Irish whiskies at the time were illicit or illegal whiskies.
So Jameson Whisky has a massive connection with the US. All bourbon whiskies are aged in new American oak barrels, and they only can use them twice. Which one of these barrels is similar to this? This was probably in the US at one stage in Jack Daniels or Jim Beam. So when they're finished with the barrels, they have no use for them and they export them to Europe.
And from there, we distill our whiskey, single grain, we store it in barrels for 3 years. Irish whiskey has to be at least 3 years old to be called Irish whiskey. Whiskey is an Irish word. We have, in Ireland, we have our own native language called Gaeilge or Irish, and the word for whiskey is Ishka Baha, 2 words. Ishka sounds like whiskey, is the word for water, and Baha is the word for life. So Ishka Baha. So St. Patrick arrived into Ireland in the year 432 AD. He was actually a Welshman. We had captured him and he was a slave in the north of Ireland for a while. He escaped and went all the way down to Rome to become a priest. On the way down to Rome and on the way back up here in 432, he stayed at monasteries and abbeys along the way in France and Belgium and I suppose Italy and whatever. And he would have come across the monks experimenting with a thing where they were making wine and grape juice into brandy. So they had learned the process of distillation. Patrick sneakily took a few notes, came to Ireland, converted us all to Christianity, and set up a few distilleries of his own quietly in the monasteries that he built here.
Originally distilled in Bow Street in Dublin, they produce 50 million bottles of whisky. So let's taste it and see what we think.
Which of the 50 millions are we going to? The big one here. That's the one I like.
You have that one and I'll get my own one.
You know, they have a little motto. I let you read it when you get your bottle of Jameson at your local bottle shop. What do you call an off-license in America?
Liquor store.
Liquor store. Okay, so I let you read that, but it means have no fear. So we're going to have no fear of tasting our whiskey right now.
Right.
Okay. If you're sitting at home at this minute watching this, do yourself a favour and set the scene. It is St. Patrick's Week and the ambience really should be right. We're so lucky we're in front of a gorgeous open fire, which is the open fireplace in O'Connor's. But you know what? Any fire will do. Sit yourself down to the table, get yourself a little glass of water, a couple of tumblers, a bottle of Irish whiskey. You don't need ice, you don't need any fancy mixers. Let's start with the basics. These guys spent a long time making it perfect. Oh, that sounded better than it. As good as it tastes, I'm sure.
Okay, before we taste it, Brian, I'm going to do a little, show you a little trick that a friend of mine, a master distiller, taught me this little trick. Whiskey is a very strong alcohol taste. It's 80% proof US, 40% proof Irish or European. People sometimes have a problem with tasting and the aromas and except you, because the alcohol is so strong, that burning taste on their tongue, and they don't really get all the flavors. So we're going to do a little trick that a friend of mine showed me.
Okay.
So we just take a little bit of whiskey and put it into our hand.
All right.
Just a tiny bit.
Tiny
like aftershave.
Oh, I would know that anyone wants to use this.
Then we're going to rub our hands together until it gets warm. I think I put too much on. It's going to take a minute until it gets nice and warm, and you burn off the alcohol, and then you just do this. And you can smell the sherry.
Oh boy,
the wood.
That's amazing.
The caramel.
It's and the sweetness. It's fruit,
yes.
And there is no fruit in this. Let me tell you, when you smell this.
No. You burn off the alcohol, and you can smell the.
Oh, that.
So that's a whiskey trick, not to tell anybody or show anybody.
No wonder I like that girl.
It's a Butler technology secret.
Oh right, I like that.
So that's done.
Do you have to wash your hands after that?
No. And, your
actually,
hands
it goes very quickly. You wouldn't even know you had done that.
Your hands are completely sterilized.
Yeah, there you go. If your wife asks you, just tell her you're sterilizing your hands.
Okay.
All right.
So
that's what they say. Inform and protect. That's the protect bit of Butler technology.
Yes, absolutely. So now, when you smell the whiskey, you can pick out them flavors and aromas now. A little bit better than to drink it straight off without.
Well, funny. When I taste, and I did a little taste in my tongue, I tasted nothing but strong whiskey.
Yes.
Now I'm getting nothing but the aroma of fruit.
And that's the wood and the influence of the US bourbon over the 3 years of sitting there.
And all of the rest, right back to Connemara, right back to the wild Atlantic air that we have here, the fresh water that we have here. And
right back to Marconi's grandfather.
These tumblers, they're like a Waterford Crystal heavy rock glass. I like that for whiskey. It kind of gives you that feeling. And as you hold the whiskey glass in your hand, it kind of warms it up. A little like brandy tasting. There's a ritual to it, and the ritual honours the people who made it. It honours the people who went before us as well. And it honours the richness of this drink. I'm going to break the rule here and have a little sip.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Sláinte. That's
a lawn, L-A-W-N, with an S before it and a cha-cha at the end. Sláinte.
Sláinte. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
You can taste the spiced wood, the caramel.
Now, I get, not a huge whiskey drinker, but I get that kick at the back of my throat. Now, I know when I drink whiskey, I prefer to add a drop of water to it.
Yes.
What's the tradition there?
Well, when you put water, it completely changes the whiskey.
I won't do it yet then.
No, you've got to taste it like this first. But 1 teaspoon of water opens up the oils in the whiskey, and it actually changes the flavour. And some people find it more palatable, easier to drink the whiskey.
So you wouldn't be adding the rest of this glass of water?
No, I'd be adding more whiskey to it.
Well, I suppose it's my palate. I'm not as used to the strong liquor. I prefer it mixed. The trend nowadays is to do Jameson and ginger ale. And
well, you can do that too. It's a nice drink.
But it's not whiskey. It's not this.
Well, you can't. You can't taste the real flavours and the real heart of the whiskey. And that's why, even by preparing, by rubbing your hands together and this, smelling the different flavours and the different woods and whatever, your palate is prepared for this whiskey.
I think my palate has been prepared for about 28 years.
I'll just move this over.
And Tom, this is a regular Jameson whiskey. This is not regular, high shelf or top shelf.
This is regular Jameson whiskey, and it's a good whiskey. And one thing I suppose we're proud of, it's a really big export from Ireland. Revenue for the state is huge for the Irish state from export when they take the whiskey out of bond and then they export it. American market, massive market for particularly Jameson. There are other Irish whiskies that are available obviously around the world. This is such a good entry level whiskey, and it stands the test of time.
It certainly does. In our house, I have to say Jameson is the king. My dad would have drank some of the older whiskies, Redbreast in particular, but they're now top shelf type of brands at this stage in the game. And then you have Go on.
They're definitely whiskies you're not putting ginger ale into.
Oh, right, okay.
So these triple distilled, it's got an easy flavour to it, but it does mix well. And, Jameson will be used in a lot of like hot whiskies, Irish coffee. We're going to make a hot whiskey in a few minutes.
We will.
So in the Middleton distillery, they have hundreds of thousands of barrels laid down of Irish whiskey. And like similar to these, the bourbon barrels. And, it's a storage facility. And imagine if you were leaking 30,000 bottles of this a day.
Imagine if you were losing 30,000 gigabits of information every day. But the technology would be very worried about that.
That's what happens it's called the angel share. So it evaporates through the wood while it is aging. And
how many?
30,000 bottles of Jameson a day evaporates in
Is there anybody sober in Cork?
I don't know. They have their own fire engine on there, because if a fire happened, it would be disastrous. But
I heard about the guy who fell into a vat of whiskey. He fought off 11 men who were trying to rescue him. So, true story.
So that's it.
So the angels, what you call it?
It's called the angel share. So it evaporates into the air, through the barrels as it's aging. So they're losing 30,000 bottles of Jameson to the angels.
And this is not fake news.
No, this is for real.
Well, for real, when my dad would take a drink of whiskey, you know the way if you spill salt, you take some salt and you throw it over your left shoulder?
Yes.
To shake off the bad luck or whatever it be. Yeah. Dad would put his finger into his whiskey before he drank it, and he would literally do that over his left shoulder, and he called that the fairy's drop.
Okay. So we've angel shares of fairy's drop.
Fairy's drop. And
Ireland is full of drunk, mystical people.
But if you haven't got a story with your drink, then you're just having a drink for the sake of having a drink.
They say that God created whiskey to stop Irish men from ruling the world. There's probably some truth in that if you look at some of the crazy inventions. But Butler technology uses leading edge technology, and since it's St. Patrick's Day, I think we should maybe have a little toast to a few of the Irish inventions over throughout history. Some of the things like, the colour photography was invented by Mr. Jolly.
Really?
Yeah. The hypodermic needle was invented by an Irish. There are lots of other inventions.
When you have the wind up you?
Yeah, I've heard it.
If you've ever stormed, they use the Beaufort scale. Okay. And that was invented by an Irish guy who invented the cup anemometer. I get a lot of inspiration from this. And the other thing, John Holland, he was an immigrant from West Clare, just by the cliffs of Moher. When you're here, you'll have to go visit them. He went to America in the 1860s. He invented the submarine. Well, the first one sank. That's where he got the idea. and I always thought in New York you'd be driving under the Holland Tunnel, but that actually wasn't named after him at all. But I always thought it was. I thought it was the coolest thing the Americans had thought to name a sub-river tunnel after an Irish inventor whose first submarine sank. There's another one, right? An Irish guy invented the ejector seat. James Bond and the jet planes and whatever. Only one problem. He invented before they invented the sliding roof.
A toast to the great Irish inventors.
And their inspiration.
Cheers.
When you do come to Ireland, hopefully you've already been here to one of the Butler Technologies conferences or whatever, but please God you'll be back here soon enough as well. When you do come here, you go to the Irish bars and you'll find a lot of people are not drinking cold whiskey with or without ice. We'd give out to you for putting ice in your whiskey here, mostly because we didn't have ice makers as easily as you would have. But we drink a lot of a thing called a hot whiskey or a hot toddy. And Tom and I are going to make a hot whiskey just to show you how it's done. But let's go back to why we do it. First of all, our climate, while it's not cold here in Ireland by any means, it's a little damp. So you tend to be chilly a bit of the time. You wear layers when you're on holidays here. And when you get indoors, into a bar like this, you go in and you say, could I have a hot whiskey, please? There's a standard recipe for a hot whiskey. It's a shot of Irish whiskey, Jameson is perfect for it, some boiling water, sugar, cloves, and lemon. And that's your basic ingredients for it. So everybody has that in their house. So for St. Patrick's Day this year, if you're in a colder climate, or even if you're not, turn on the AC and make yourself an Irish whiskey. This is what it's all about on St. Patrick's Day. So we'll get the ingredients together. When we're back to you, we'll show you how it's done. Meantime, I'm going to do what my father did. I'm putting a tiny drop to break the oils in the whiskey I feel like I'm saying mass here, maybe, but and then a little bit over my shoulder for the fairies, and here's to St. Patrick and all the good he did, getting rid of the snakes.
Okay, we're going to make a hot whiskey. So basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a whiskey that's hot.
But you know what? By trial and error, we've actually perfected it.
We've perfected it.
Yeah,
There's a little art to making this. Not too skilled, but there are a few rules and regulations. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this really nice glass so it doesn't crack. We're going to put a teaspoon in before we pour that water in. Then you just pour in some boiling water.
Oh, sorry, I got it.
We waited 2 days for this to boil on the fire, and then we cheated. So we're going to put in a spoon of sugar into the water, and we're going to stir that around.
Tom was using brown sugar.
Yes, brown sugar.
And you know, the brown sugar, to my mind, gives a different flavour. Of course, it's different to our refined white sugar. The white sugar is from sugar beet, whereas the brown sugar is from sugar cane, which came all the way from, in the old days, from Cuba, or indeed from the Caribbean, which is your little American connection there. There's another American, or at least an overseas connection.
We're going to get there in a minute.
We're going to get there, all right.
So you pour in an exact amount of whiskey.
I love that. So that's one finger or my big finger.
Count to 10 backwards. And then we're going to put in the lemon.
Tom was going to put in a slice of lemon, you know, and this is how we do it here. You do a shake and a whatever. But no, our lemon, we also add a thing called cloves. Cloves are from the Spice Islands. In the old days, the Portuguese and the Spanish and the French and everyone else, they wanted these spices because we didn't have things like spices in England and Ireland in the Middle Ages and whatever. And this changed the taste of everything, and it was worth its weight in gold. But if you drop a clove into, see the little cloves here? If you drop a clove into the drink, it starts to go up and down and up and down. And by the time you take your drink of the drink, you end up eating a clove. Not a good idea. The clove flavour is delicious, but eating one isn't. So we stick the cloves.
Yes, so we don't choke on them. So then you just pop the slice of lemon with the cloves stuck into it, into the whiskey, and there you are, the perfect hot whiskey. And I didn't make you one.
I have my
Cheers.
own.
So this is the hot whiskey. Very, very nice on a cold day, or if you've got a head cold, or
and sniff it.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to enjoy whiskey on a cold
So when
day.
you've done your days touring in Ireland, whether it's summer or winter, doesn't matter, come in, ask for a hot whiskey, or sometimes they call it a hot toddy.
Yeah.
And you know what? It sets you up.
Happy St. Patrick's Day from all at Butler Technologies.
And here's to stories. Lots of them tonight.